Welcome to Light Church Online. Thank you for joining us for today's message.
As I pray over what we do here on a daily basis, there are some things that are troubling. And they're troubling because what I see and sense is that we have not fully appreciated what God has done here. And it's very easy to take things for granted, and then after they are not there and your life starts to look drastically different than you anticipating it looking, you can't figure out, well, what happened? Okay, there is a guard underneath my car, and it's kind of a plastic thing that goes underneath. So if you're going to work on, let's say the belt, you got to take that off. Well, I hit a piece of rubber from a truck in the highway. You know how truck rubber comes off? And so I couldn't dodge it because there were cars on each side. So I hit it, and it knocked that guard loose. It didn't fall, but I noticed, on occasion I would hear something flapping, flap, 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 and I slowed down and it would stop. I speed up, flap, 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 flap. I said, I bind you, devil. You ain't tearing up my car. Ain't nothing wrong with this car. Now, this is a lesson for us faith folk. Sometimes it ain't the devil. All right? And so it stopped, and I drove for about a week not hearing anything. Then I started hearing this sound like something was dragging on the ground. So I'm backing out of my garage, and I have to go back in the house for something. So I pulled out and left my car running in the drive, ran back in through the garage. When I'm coming out, I'm noticing something hanging out from the front of my car, and it's a long piece of it looked like rubber, but it was a spongy type of, I don't know what you call that, but it goes to that guard. But it was loose, and so it was just hanging out underneath the car. Now, where we live, on occasion, reptiles have been known to crawl up in the yard. So when I see this thing hanging out under my car, quite naturally, what any sane person would do, I grabbed the hoe, because this snake ain't finna crawl up in my engine. And I go to whacking on this thing before I looked at it real good. And so it was the rubber guard to that plastic guard. So I did a pretty good job of killing that thing, because I knocked the guard all the way off. So I just picked it up and threw it in the trunk. It's been there since. I'm gonna get it fixed. Y'all know me, it's hard for me to get out of my car, man. It says, hey, wait a minute. Okay, I'm gonna get it fixed. But as I'm driving, I'm noticing something different. And I said all that to say that I never considered that guard until it was no longer there. Now something sounds different. It's not operating the way the manufacturer planned on it operating, because though it looks insignificant, they put it there for a reason. So I'm thinking, that sounds like a lot of people that I know that used to go to church. In fact, if you had told me that I would live to see the day that they would no longer go, I would have told you about yourself. Not that person. And as I talked with them, they began to talk about stuff going wrong in their life. And they just can't figure out, I just can't figure out why I'm going wrong. I used to do this and I used to do this. Remember I used to sing in the choir? Well, you was in the choir, but you fill the numbers up. All right, and so they just, and it's like they never have made the connection between something that they thought was insignificant, like being in church. And so when they take that away from their lives, the devil puts blinders on so that they will never equate, because you'll never get them to admit that that's your problem right there. Just like, that guard coming off. I mean, man, what is this? Just plastic? But they put it there for a reason. When God said, the closer we get to his return, well, we're closer now than we were 100 years ago. When he said, don't forsake the assembling of yourselves together as the manner of some is, he put that in the scriptures for a reason. And we're seeing relationships go south. We're seeing people live lives now estranged from family for decades. I ain't talked to my sister in 20 years. Huh? Y'all grew up in church together. We was in the shepherd, well, they was in the YA girls together. It's like, and y'all, what happened? Well, one stopped going to church, and the other went to a different church and then got mixed up into something that was away from the scriptures that had been laid in their lives as foundational. And you can't figure out what's going on. But as I look over what we do, and I'm the kind of person when, and I don't try to disguise it, I just don't try and be mean about it, but I don't try and disguise the fact that when something is not working the way I think it should work, I ain't happy. I don't like failure. Okay? And when something looks like it's failing, I got a problem. Now, maybe it's okay to you. Maybe you pass off mediocrity as something that's acceptable, but not me. I ask questions, namely of myself, because the Bible says that faith, 1 John chapter 5, will conquer whatever the world throws out at you. This is the victory that overcomes the world. Whatever the world out there imposes or tries to impose upon you, if you're operating by faith, you should overcome it. That doesn't mean that there won't be challenges, that there won't be resistance. The resistance is coming from the world. But it does mean that if you are operating this way, you are supposed to see success. Period. So when I ask questions about things that I see here that is either mediocre at best or just plain failing, I'm not that happy about that. So as I was talking to the Lord, he reminded me of this text, Hebrews chapter 4. Hebrews chapter 4. I'm going to read just one verse because this one verse really says it all. Hebrews 4:2 says, for indeed the gospel was preached to who? To who? The gospel was preached to us as well as to them. Gospel being good news. All right. But the word which they heard. Now, who was it preached to? Us as well as them. Now, we're going to talk about who the them is in a minute. But we do know it was preached to us. The gospel, the good news, was preached to us as well as to them. But the word which they heard did not profit them, not being mixed with what? With faith in those who heard it. Same gospel, same good news. It was designed to profit them. It was designed to prosper them. It was designed to give them success in life. The gospel that was preached to them, the gospel that's preached to us, is designed to make you succeed in life. It's not designed to make you fail. The gospel preached to you is designed by God to empower you to prosper in whatever He has sown you into. You're in business. The gospel preached to you is supposed to make you successful in business. If you're married, the gospel preached to you ought to make you successful in your marriage. If you're a parent, the gospel preached to you is designed to make you prosperous as a parent. It is designed to prosper. He said, the one that spoke it, so shall my word be that goes out of my mouth. It shall prosper in the thing whereunto I sent it. So when I looked at this text, it caused me to reflect on some things that were somewhat upsetting. Because like I say, there are certain things and you know, you need people that's going to tell you the truth. They love you enough to tell you the truth. Okay, if you're acting a fool and the way you acting a fool is going to kill you, you don't need somebody call your friend tell me, oh man, you know, that's all right. You need a friend that's going to love you enough to tell you, man, you acting a fool, and if you keep acting a fool, you going to die. All right. And so when I looked at this, because I've been asking the Lord for a while, okay, Lord, where are we missing this at? We obviously are missing it somewhere. You say, why would you say that? Because I'm not naive enough to think that everything we do prospers the way it's supposed to be. Okay? And so when it doesn't work and produce like He said it's supposed to produce, and I don't measure what I think productivity is by human standards, I measure it by His. And the only way to get that standard is not by talking to you or talking to other preachers. Go to the source. Because He tells you when it's working right, look at the results. Right? All right. And He also tells you when it's not working right, this is the reason. So the question then I had to ask myself is very simple, and that is, are you using faith? Are you using faith? Because if you're using faith and you're using it accurately, the way He instructs us to, you should be seeing success. There ain't no way to cut it. If you're not experiencing success, stop laying it off on God, claiming he's delaying your success, and just get real with yourself. Look yourself in the mirror and just ask yourself, are you using faith? Because if you are, then either you're not using it correctly, or you just plain ain't using it at all. Now, you remember a couple of weeks back, I told you there wasn't but one question that Jesus asked in the midst of that storm after he dealt with it, right? He didn't ask about, was everybody all right? Remember I told y'all that? He didn't ask about the condition of the boat. He didn't go into any kind of explanation about why storms come. One question and one question only. You remember what it was? What was it? Where is your faith? And so I have to ask myself, Ron, are you using faith? And if you're not, start. That ain't a hard fix. He's not angry. He's not pleased when we don't use faith. He told us that. Hebrews 11. Without faith, it is impossible to please God. Now, in Hebrews chapter 4, we just read it. The gospel was preached to us, and it was preached to them. So now we need to find out who the them is. Okay? So if you go back to chapter 3, verse 12 says, beware, brethren, lest there be in any of you an evil heart of unbelief in departing from the living God. But exhort one another daily, while it is called today, lest any of you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. Wow. There's two instructions right there we need to get better at. All right? Stop departing from God. So I haven't departed from God. Wait a minute. Anytime you got your own opinion and you think your way is better than the instructions that God gave you, either directly or through a leader that he has put you under, you are departing from him. Then he tells us to exhort one another. Okay, exhort doesn't just mean, encourage. Exhort means it has a component of sharpness to it if necessary. So he says, exhort one another how frequently? Every single day. Okay, because if you don't, he says it's easy for your heart to become hard because you get deceived by sin. Sin causes the hardening of the heart. So to prevent that, you got to have daily exhortation. Wow. Have we been exhorting one another daily? Well, how does that look, Pastor? Okay, I'll get to that in just a second. Because again, this is not difficult. Verse 14. For we have become partakers of Christ if we hold the beginning of our confidence steadfast to the end. While it is said, today if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as in the rebellion. So we know rebels have a hard heart. Now, in short, how does your heart become hard? You become self-focused. It's all about you. It's not about the people you're supposed to be serving, though you claim it is. And the proof that it's not about the people that you're serving is because you demand your own way instead of what actually works in their best interest. All right? Verse 16, for who having heard rebelled? What? They heard it, and yet they rebelled. Indeed, was it not all who came out of Egypt led by Moses? Also now, when we read, the gospel was preached to us, and it was preached to, we know who the them are now. Who are the them? Who were the them? It's the group Moses brought out of Egypt, right? Verse 17 now, with whom was he angry 40 years? Was it not with those who sinned, whose corpses fell in the wilderness? And to whom did he swear that they would not enter his rest, but to those who did not obey? So we see that they could not enter into what? Into his rest. They couldn't. Though the good news was preached to them so that they could enter in. That's the reason he had it preached to them. Moses preached to that bunch about all of the good things that they were going to have in Canaan once they got there. He told them from A to Z, this is what it is. This is what you can expect. God's going to do this, and you're going to have this, and you're going to have this. You're going to live in houses you didn't build. You're going to drink from wells you didn't have to dig. He preached the good news to them. And yet, it tells us they rebelled. How do you rebel over good news? He says they did not believe. I'm still trying to work all this out in my thinking. You would rather go back to where you came from, where you was getting your head beat. You was made to labor stressfully, I might add, and yet God sends you a deliverer with a good news message and demonstrates that the message works because he brought you out. You actually got out. And you got out not secretly. You didn't sneak out of Egypt at night. You got out publicly. You got out with all of their stuff. You got out with the power and presence of God showing you who he was and showing you that Pharaoh was no match for him. And all you had to do was just believe what Moses preached. And you rebel? Chapter 4, verse 1. Therefore, now we know what it's there for. Since a promise remains of entering his rest, let us fear lest any of you seem to come short of it. For indeed, the gospel was preached to us as well as to them. Let me read it again. Therefore, since a promise remains, a promise what? Remain. What does remain mean? It's still there. The promise is still there. What promise? Entering into his rest. That promise is still intact. Let us fear lest any of us come short of it, like they who got the gospel preached to them came short. Why did they come short? Because they did not believe. So what they heard, they did not believe. It's what is meant by it not being mixed with faith. They heard the same message of good news that we are hearing, the good news of Jesus and how all things are now made right between us and God. And that God, once again, is our great provider and protector. Rest from our worries and our fears. Not having to stress out about what's happening in the world. Rest. And all we have to do is be obedient and not rebel. I'm reminded of a cartoon that I saw. Some of you may have seen it or heard about it, of a little boy that was in church. And his mother, I think it was, told him to sit down. First couple of times he ignored it. Third time, he was sitting. And there's a caption under the last box from this little boy. Bubble. I'm sitting down on the outside, but I'm standing up on the inside. That's what rebellion looks like. I'm going to do what they say, but, I don't like it. I mean, so why we got to do this? I know this is our policy. Oh, no, take that back. I know this is y'all's policy. But I think, do you understand what rebellion is? Okay? You can't operate by faith and rebel at the same time. Okay, they don't run together. So rest is supposed to be the expression of the presence, peace, and power of God operating through us. Okay? Rest is not the absence of problems. It's the presence of power. Was Jesus a man of rest? Was he? And yet he had problems. Didn't he? I'd say if they want to throw you off the cliff behind the church, that's a problem. You train people and you decide on your way to the next destination you're going to catch a nap, and they wake you up saying we finna die. That's a problem. They stone you for doing some good works. Because Jesus said, which of these y'all stoning us for? I'd say that's a problem. So rest is not the absence of problems, it's the presence of power. You can rest even though there's a burglar at the door. If you got the power, talk to me somebody. If you got the power to stop him from breaking in your house, you can sleep, right? Not because ain't no burglars, because you got the power. So not all that heard the word were blessed with the benefits that the word had in it. Why? Because they did not mix it with faith. They rebelled against it. And you can go back and read their experiences in the wilderness. Always complaining. It's hot out here, so God gave them central air conditioning. It's cold in this nighttime, so God gave them central heat. We ain't got no meat to eat, so God gives them quail till it comes out their nose. Ain't no water out here, so he gives them water out of a rock. I mean, just constantly complaining. And finally, just because they didn't like Moses, and there's a number of reasons, I won't go into that, they decide, you know what, we sick of Moses. So we're going to get us another leader who's going to take us back to Egypt. See where rebellion leads? It starts with that internal attitude, and it ends with open, outright rebellion. And your faith will not work in that atmosphere. And so what happens is you end up working a lot harder than God ever intended for you to work. Because rest doesn't mean hard labor. Rest means a deliverance from the curse of hard labor. Remember, that was one of the curses that God told Adam, okay, now, buddy, you had rest in the garden. Now you're going to have to work by the sweat of your brow. In other words, now it's going to be hard on you. Okay, you just think you had problems with Eve. you really finna have some challenges now, buddy Rowe. Well, the word that we received is called gospel, good news, because it is intended to free us from that labor. Not that we don't work, but we don't work laboriously as we did when we didn't have Jesus. You got it? Jesus don't make all your problems go away. He gives you power to deal with them. Oh, y'all listen to me? Jesus don't stop sickness in the world. He gives you power to defeat sickness. And so he tells his disciples, you go out there where you see the sick, heal them. Jesus doesn't evict all of the demons. He gives you power to deal with him. Like I said, you can sleep at night. I'm not trying to offend nobody. You can sleep at night, even if it's in the middle of the deepest, darkest, hardest project, if you got the power to make sure that you and all your household is safe. Are y'all listening to me? Don't make no difference where you stay. You can sleep in the highest polluting suburb with all of the people looking down at you and wishing you wasn't in the neighborhood because you parking your Monte Carlo on the lawn at night. You coming out with your undershirt on to get the paper in the morning, looking like, just anything. But you ain't got to worry about them. As long as you know that the good news is that I got the power to keep them from doing anything to me. You got it? How do I know that's true? Because when I read the Old Testament, the episode of Daniel and his three friends. Daniel was a Jew in a Gentile environment. He was hated on by all of those other folk. Didn't bother Daniel a bit. We're going to put you in this line then. Do what you got to do, man. We're going to throw you in this furnace. Y'all got any steaks I can take in there with me? Because I'm going to eat real good. Everything they tried to do to Daniel, because he was not one of them, did not work. In fact, what happened? If you read the end of that story, Daniel got promoted above all of his haters. Why? Because he didn't have problems? No, but because he had the power working in him to overcome it. What was Daniel's power? He was humble before his God. He didn't go in there bullying and rebelling against those that were in authority. Even though they were Gentiles, Daniel was submitted to them. The only time Daniel did not submit is when they put that decree that Daniel couldn't worship his God. Now we got a problem. I do all other stuff now, but now, hey, wait, you ain't finna tell me I can't worship my God. That's where I draw the line. You follow what I'm saying? In other words, Daniel was using faith. Are you using faith? We don't like to look at the areas of our life where we're not making it. We're failing. This ain't working. I'm seeing the scripture say this happened to them, this happened to them, and this happened to them, and yet they were listed as men and women of faith, and God power delivered them and provided for them and did all kinds of. I'm not seeing that. Are you using faith? And if you are not, you ought to be man enough, woman enough, humble enough to say, God, I'm obviously missing this. Start with your own heart. Make sure you're not in rebellion. Are you following your leaders? Why y'all get quiet? Are you following your leaders? You know, because see, you can't claim, well, I know the Lord sent me here to this church, but then you don't want to follow none of the leaders that are here. Because somehow or another, you know, your application to Ford hadn't been processed yet. You know, Ford's motto is, we got a better way. And while you wait on Ford to hire you so you can use your better way, you causing everybody else problems. You on your job running your mouth. That's rebellion. I still ain't figured that out yet. I'm still believing God to show me that in Scripture, where I get to talk about the person He using to provide for me. That's rebellion. And faith does not work in that environment. So that's the question of the day. Are you using faith? How does that look? It's really very simple, because He told us they heard the same word. So that's the first step. You gotta take heed what you hear. All right. But then it said they didn't mix it with faith. Well, what does that mean? That means they didn't do what He told them to do. Not just from a soulish perspective, but from the heart. Because we already know that even though God created your brain, He's interested in your heart. And so you can follow instructions and still not be operating in faith, because in your heart, you got this attitude that, you know, people making you do something you don't want to do, and you know, they ought to listen to you, and you know, man, they don't know what they're doing, and all of that is the seeds of rebellion that indicate the real problem is your unbelief. Because when you believe that God is using this person and submits and requires me to submit to that person, then I don't have to understand it all. Because the Apostle Paul, in helping us, says you ought to work for those that you are under as though you're working for Jesus. Are you using faith? What are the areas of your life that you can honestly say, this is not working? The money ain't coming like it should be. My soul is not in the shape it should be in. Physically, I'm not where I should be. Socially, I'm not where I should be. And yes, even for us here at the church, there are areas that this is nowhere close to where it should be. So I have to ask, are you using faith? And if I'm not, which I have come to the conclusion that there are certain areas where we started using faith, but somehow got off track. And so my prayer is, Lord, continue to enlighten me, because you are much bigger in your operation and much more powerful in your favor and influence of people than what we've seen. That's a reality. Not to diminish or demean any of the work, but folks, if you think that operating in the power of God is to the degree that we should be, is denoted in the results we've gotten, you don't know the power of God. Not based on the standard that we have. Few people get saved, few people get baptized, few people have a few little financial miracles. If you think that measures up to what the word says it should look like, you don't have a clue what the power of God really looks like. So I have to conclude, these are areas that we're not using our faith. At least not properly, because it's supposed to look like a lot different than this. So, as I continue to believe God, I continue to make the adjustments personally and here at the church. You're going to have to do the same in your life. You're going to have to do the same in the area of ministry that you serve in. Told you leaders, when you hear the word here, you shouldn't just be hearing it for your own personal application. You ought to be hearing it for the application of the work that you are assigned to here. And when we do that, we should, not we ought to, we should expect the same results that we read about in the scriptures. Father, in the name of Jesus, we thank you for...
Life is a race, but you don't have to run it alone. Take advantage of your help. Receive Jesus today, and he will help you with everything you're going through. God has a plan for you. The first step in that plan is salvation. Read Romans 10:9 and pray this prayer of salvation. God in heaven, I believe in my heart you raised Jesus from the dead. I confess with my mouth, Jesus is the Lord. Jesus, I call on you now for my eternal salvation. I receive forgiveness for all my sin. I accept your unconditional love. Thank you for receiving me. I submit myself to you. With you as my helper, I will live according to your plan the rest of my life. Amen. If you are blessed by today's message, we encourage you to give an offering. Simply click the Give Online link on the Light Church homepage. Thank you for tuning in this week. We look forward to you joining us during our next broadcast. Have a blessed week.